Welcome everyone to the October edition of Mytech U, where we're going to be talking about how to choose what internet connection is right for you. We're doing a little bit different format today. Philip is going to be on the phone with us and presenting the majority of the content. However, we have some guest presenters to add some value relative to this content, as Mytech is not an internet service provider and we do not resell or we're not an agent for any internet service provider. So we've got Jim and Chris from Frontier Communications, and we've got John from Foster Inc. Foster Inc. So we're going to start by going, Philip, move it to the next slide. We're really going to start about framing up the conversation of what really happens, what have we experienced in the last several years with regard to how businesses are leveraging the internet and really leveraging other applications and other tools that are relying on the internet more than how they're leveraging the internet. Secondly, Philip is really going to talk about the different types of connectivity that exist out there, some of the different characteristics, and what we as an IT service provider want to see from our customers to set them up for success, to have the right level of reliability and redundancy to operate their business. And then finally, as that framework, to kind of set the stage, we're going to try and go through that quickly so we have a good 15, 20 minutes at the end for a panelist discussion, where we're going to open it up and dig into all kinds of questions. So we're encouraging the audience to raise their hand or to use the question tab on their control panel, and I, as the moderator, will be moderating or monitoring that board, and we will interject the questions for the panelists. So with that, I do want to say welcome to our panelists. They will have a chance to introduce themselves a little bit later, and we'll move on to the content here. So let's start, and I'm just going to lead it off here with, what are some of the things that we've seen change in the business environment that's really applying pressure to connectivity. So part of it is, going back 15 years when, Mytech first started, one of the main roles that we played was to help customers get a high-speed internet connection when they were on dial-up to begin with. So boy, are we in a different place today. Not only do customers have lots of different reasons to use the internet, they already have networks, they already have domain-based emails, all those things are in place, but they're really leveraging more and more hosted applications. So if we start at the top, you see most people today, not most, there's probably a good percentage of small businesses today that are now hosting their email somewhere. Office 365 being one of those main ones, maybe using Google, other email hosting providers. You have to be hiding under a rock for the last several years if you haven't heard of Salesforce.com and other CRM programs that are oftentimes hosted. Many people have their point-of-sale applications hosted. A lot of the different applications they use are hosted. And then, of course, many people have heard of Office 365, which is Microsoft's online suite that includes email hosting, as SharePoint hosting, into messaging and video chat, and a bunch of other services that you can use via online. And I was thought with those hosted applications to just really focus on the fact that these are just because the internet, the proliferation of internet and the availability of bandwidth has made these solutions more cost-effective in recent years. It used to be, $15 to $30 a month per email box to host something offline or host something externally from your organization, whereas today you can get that for as little as about $4 per mailbox per month. So the cost is dramatically different, and that applies to a lot of these other solutions, which has really driven this adoption of hosted applications, because you're getting a lot more reliability, a lot more redundancy, and availability for a much lower cost than what you could probably do yourself in most cases. So that's some of the key hosted applications. Again, a lot of those folks listening online, you're probably already using some of those, and you might not even know it. It could be something like Dropbox or at least ones that you've heard of that are also kind of hosted applications. Backup disaster recovery, again, going back 10, 15 years, it's been probably in the last 6 or 7 or 8 years that we've gone from using tapes, which was the key mode of backups for most small businesses, really to where now it's a disk to disk, and what we say then to cloud. So we want to eliminate the role of human interaction, so we can automate a lot of the off-site storage of data. So that's really one of the things that has put a lot of pressure on internet connections, because it's no longer now just the download or the downstream connection. It's really we need to push data off-site. So that's putting a lot of pressure on the upload, which is, again, we'll talk about the different connectivity types and availability of upload speeds and how critical it is. But that's a key variable. And then the other thing with regard to backup and disaster recovery is the ability to recover in the cloud. Many of our customers today, if you're considering a backup and disaster recovery plan, part of that recovery plan is being able to, if something happened to their physical building or one of their physical buildings or offices, then they have the ability to actually, because they've been sending their data off-site from a backup perspective, to actually turn on and access that data in the cloud. Well, guess what? You need internet connectivity to do that, and you need good quality internet connectivity to do that. So that's another definite significant change in the small business world that we've seen where that's relying, and it's requiring a change in how small businesses subscribe to internet services. And finally, one of the major initiatives that we see is just increased mobility across the workplace. People working from home, people working from coffee shops, people working from hotels, people working from planes. I mean, you can still get internet on plane today. So this doesn't necessarily play into the so much sometimes the internet connectivity that you have at your physical office, although sometimes it does if these people are doing remote access. So if I'm sitting in a coffee shop and I need to access my quoting tool that's sitting on a server at my office, well, I better have the right connectivity and the remote access and the right redundancy to be able to do that. So the increasingly mobile workforce that's evolving and adapting today, has been for the last several years, is putting a different kind of pressure on internet connectivity than it has in the past. So that's really part of the gist of this conversation, and why we wanted to bring this content to our audience is because there's a lot of these trends that we're seeing that are different. If you haven't kept up with a lot of the changes, that's why we brought some experts on the phone today, then there's different ways that small businesses are using the internet connections, and there's different types of internet connections that are becoming available. So this is at least a start to the frame of the panel conversation that we're going to have later, but wanted to kind of set some foundation with these components here. So with that said, Philip, I'd like you to take it on the next, which is let's talk about the types of connectivity that we're seeing and some of the different feature sets that you're seeing on different types of connectivity as well. And then, by all means, Jim, Chris, and John, please interject on the next slide in particular as you see fit.
Well, thanks for that handoff, Nathan. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone, depending on where you are, I suppose. Again, my name is Philip Holt, and I'm a chief architect here at Mytech, and we're going to talk a little bit about some of the different types of internet connectivities we have. So Nathan has this slide up. He's talked about some stuff, but the quick idea here is we need more connectivity and more reliable connectivity. Again, we need more reliability and more connectivity, and we need more reliability and more connectivity. So there's kind of a recurring theme coming through here. And what I like to do when I talk about internet connectivity types is there are a lot of different mechanisms for getting your site or location or your person connected to this big internet cloud idea, concept, place. And a good way of thinking about it is because we have multiple different types of connectivities, a lot of them have different features and a lot of different characteristics that differentiate them. And some of the kind of key three ones I've outlined here are the performance, the price, and the reliability. And these three things we'll go over a little deeper in just a second here really correspond to essentially the traditional kind of three-legged stool, right? You can kind of pick two of these at any given time. So to discuss a little bit about what I mean when we talk about performance, normally the kind of advertised information you see when you talk about about performance with regards to internet connectivity is people are oftentimes citing things and numbers associated with a certain amount of bandwidth. This is going to be the megabits per second, or the download speeds, or the maximum speed at which information can get transmitted from wherever it is to you. And that's oftentimes we'll hear things like Comcast talking about their 100 megabit per second, or Google Fiber being at 1 gigabit per second. Those are very, very much larger pipes, orders of magnitude faster pipes than we had available to us even as recently as 5 years ago. But the amount of data that can move from point A to point B is not the only metric that we need to concern ourselves when we're talking about the performance of an internet pipe. We also need to talk about a concept called latency. And latency is different from bandwidth, in that it's not necessarily the quantity of information that can be moved from point A to point B, but rather the speed at which information can go from point A to point B and back to point A again. There are certain there are certain services that you access over internet or network connections that are substantially more latency sensitive than they are to bandwidth sensitive. Classic example of that would be something like voice over IP, where the total amount of data that's being moved from one place to another is not very large, but you don't want to be waiting a second or two before you hear the person respond to the question you asked them. So latency is a metric that's usually measured in milliseconds. And there are some limits of physics involved with these connections. If you're physically on the East Coast and West Coast, there is a minimum latency you can achieve that is limited by the lengths of the wires and the speed of light. But latency is another metric that's important for us to track when we're talking about different types of internet connections. We also have a concept of symmetric versus asymmetric connectivity. Your standard residential service, when you're accessing the internet, you're very concerned about the speed of information as it comes down to you because you're generally a consumer. You're usually going out and viewing websites. You're usually viewing videos. You're concerned about going out and getting the stuff that's out there and bringing it to you, and less about delivering content out to the rest of the world. In a business case or in many other scenarios where you're hosting content or you have data internally that you need to be able to get to externally, the information kind of flows the other way. And in order for different products to be differentiated by the providers, and there are some technical reasons that I'm guessing some of our panelists might be able to weigh in on, oftentimes you'll see that the speeds and feeds that are discussed with regards to bandwidth on some products, it may have a different upload versus download speed. And so that's another type of the performance indicator that we have. The second kind of major leg of the stool is the price. And so we've talked about the performance as being one of the criteria, and certainly you can do a little bit of arithmetic and come up with a metric of the dollars per megabit per second of speed that you're paying for. So in general, you spend more money, you get more speed, but that comes with some of the other, it may not necessarily be the same latency, or it may be a different type of connectivity. And so the dollars per megabit per second is only one of the comparative units we need to use when associating some of these things. In general, with different types of connectivity, there may in fact be equipment that the customer needs to acquire or provide internally on their side, and they're oftentimes associated with contract commitments from the vendor who may be providing that service. The third kind of leg of the stool is the concept of just because I'm giving you an advertise and telling you you have speeds up to, there is a notion of how available is this service. Is it 24/7? Is it going to be down twice a week? Is the bandwidth that you're telling me I'm going to get really what I'm going to get? And is the service level that the provider is giving it, is it a proactive type of connectivity, or is it a reactive type of connectivity? The difference being, for example, if perhaps you have a T1 circuit, your telco is going to notice as soon as that circuit is down and work before you ever contact them to bring it back up, whereas with certain types of cable connection, it may be up for you to pick up the phone and call in and get in the queue. So that kind of touches on the three major legs of the stool there with internet connectivity types. I'm going to talk a little bit about Mytech. As we've worked with our small business customers, we have a concept of trying to get the best of both worlds between what may be a slower but more reliable connection versus a very fast but unreliable connection. And the way we tend to handle that is we encourage people to have both. An example may be that you might have a local cable provider providing one large pipe at a low cost, and then you may have a T1 or some bonded T1s providing a much more stable but lower bandwidth solution, which we can associate with internal services you have to provide. Placing the appropriate firewall in place is going to allow us to load balance and identify which traffic should flow out which pipes. It will also give us the ability to shape some of that traffic as well. Maybe we limit what people can do, how they can do it, whether or not they can view certain videos or at what time of day. And it gives us centralized access to those different pipes. I've drawn up a little bit of a slide here which kind of graphically displays what I've talked about here. And again, just to kind of go over the scenario that Mytech recommends very often in our solutions, is we have, in general, the internet connecting through 2 different service providers or ISPs, and the types of connections may be different. So we may use for the fast down, low-cost pipe, we may use something like a cable or a DSL modem or some other lower cost per megabit service, in addition to a more reliable type of service that may have higher reliability metrics and better QoS and better SLAs, oftentimes associated perhaps with static IP addresses as well, that can allow us to host those critical services that we have on our site, whether those be email or portal access or certain hosted applications. The firewall we choose and we recommend generally want to be able to support both of those types of traffic, have auto failover, have the ability to redirect traffic from one circuit to the other in case of failure of either one, thus kind of increasing the reliability as a whole and ensuring access to all of our data, whether it be internal or external, from our private networks and our users.
And Philip, I know, like in one of the examples, on the web surfing, streaming media, and file transfers, oftentimes you can also, through that firewall, you can do segmentation. What are some of the typical, can you articulate a little bit of that, of the types of traffic, like backup traffic versus just web browsing versus, like you said, application access? I mean, how do you typically, are these multiple ISP scenarios identify, or like how do we segment that, from a configuration perspective typically?
Sure. So generally the role of segmenting the type of traffic, again, falls to the role of part of what the firewall is doing. Beyond simply saying people can't come in or who can go out, we are also going to identify the type of traffic as it goes out and redirect it either through the green line or through the yellow line. And that can be done through a variety of different mechanisms inside of the firewall. Sometimes we will be able to, we'll identify the computers on the internal network that are going out. So we may say that, desktops and workstations may be the criteria by which we define which internet pipe they go out. In other cases, we may use the firewall to identify the type of traffic that's being passed. Perhaps there's some traffic that is VoIP or voice or like we're doing now, some presentation information that's outbound content, and I may be able to identify by the firewall, by watching the flow of traffic, understanding what port it's traversing on, I can identify that this particular bit of traffic is in fact latency sensitive and then pass it through the other pipe. So I believe, to answer your question, primarily those we as an organization can define what types of traffic we feel would be better suited for either path A or path B, but the role of performing those actions by the minute is going to be performed by the firewall or routing device in place.
Yep. No, thank you. And really the point, so defining that, and really the idea is to identify what are those business critical, which is on the previous slide I identified that, what are the business critical functions. For instance, if you're a retail organization and you're processing credit cards, you probably want to put that on your most reliable connection, but it might be able to fail over to the other connection, as Philip was saying. Or if you're a point-of-sale application, or or if it's if it's your off-site backup, well, we want your primary traffic going across the main connection, and if we're sending your data off-site, we're going to use a secondary connection because we don't want it to interfere with business traffic. So we can, as Philip said, we have the opportunity to identify that and segment the traffic, but also fail over in the event of either one of those connections failing. So that's good. So that should thanks for laying down that foundation, Philip, and hopefully, John and Jim and Chris, that gave you a good kind of idea of where we are coming from. I know we've worked with you both your organizations for years, so at this point, let's hand it over to Jim and then Chris, respectively, to just do a quick introduction of yourself, your history with your organization, and then we'll kind of move into the panel discussion. So Jim, take it away.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Jim Krieger. I'm with Frontier Communications. I've been with the company, celebrated my 14th year anniversary in January, and man, time goes fast. Give you a little background. I actually cover about 150 commercial accounts in Dakota County, mainly in the Burnsville, Apple Valley, Lakeville, Rosemount, and Farmington area. That's a lot of Frontier serving area down there, and work with commercial customers on internet connections like we're talking about today, installing voice over IP phone systems. We work with them on strategic planning in terms of where they're at today and where they want to go as a company, and talk with them about technology in general and the steps that they need to take to help get them there. So I've got a lot of experience. I've been in the business 20 years, just to give you an idea. I worked for a company back in '94. We used to install a T1 circuit in downtown Minneapolis that would feed the whole building with 30 to 50 tenants, and people were just in absolute heaven because it was so much better than a dial-up connection. T1 today, a lot of people will say to me, you know, is a T1 a good service? And I said, well, you probably have multiple T1s coming into your home today, just with technology being what it is. So a lot of things have changed, and it's been kind of fun to see it all happen.
Definitely in the last 20 years, that's part of our world that's changed significantly, is the speed of internet and the cost effectiveness of it. So absolutely. So hey, Chris, so what's your role over at Frontier?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. My name is Chris Fursky. I'm a senior sales engineer for Frontier. I've been with the company about 2.5 years. I work on networking designs from T1s to Metro Ethernet, fiber versus copper. We deal with voice solutions as far as designing voice over IP networks. Really work closely with Jim and our team to help customers kind of design where they want to go or educate them on what's available to make things happen. Most of my background, I've spent 18+ years, as head of IT for various organizations. So I've got more of a customer perspective to be able to know what it's like to roll these technologies out and deal with the situations from a customer perspective, and bring that experience to the table to help customers that we deal with every day learn about these things and just, factor in all of these pieces with regard to connectivity and technology and applications.
So that sounds good. So thank you for that, Chris. It's good to have your kind of technical experience on the telecom side. That definitely, because they all have to work together. So that's great to hear, and we'll definitely leverage that through the panel conversation. So we also invited John Foster to join us. So one of the things, just for those in the audience, if you're not familiar with these two organizations, Frontier is a carrier, whereas John can work with multiple carriers. And that we've worked with John in the Twin Cities more than the southern part of the city area, which is where Jim had mentioned that kind of Frontier's focus is. So there's definitely a difference between the two. So John, can you introduce yourself and kind of articulate a little bit about how you engage with customers?
Sure. Thanks, Nathan. Yeah, hi, everyone. My name's John Foster, and started Foster Telecommunications, and we recently changed our name here this last year to Foster Inc., just because so many of the things, as indicated earlier on this call, with technology continuing to evolve, we're not just doing telecommunications anymore. Our business model is morphed into really being more of that trusted customer advocate to help guide them and navigate them through these different bandwidth pieces. It was refreshing to see that Mytech, takes that time to help customers identify the different components of bandwidth as it relates to being able to take a look at broadband versus dedicated, and those changing trends there, if you will, and helping customers understand that they can't oftentimes run their 100 to 200 plus employee companies on a $100 connection, and walking them through and helping them understand that. So we've worked with Mytech over the years on various applications, and seeing the similarities of the communication that we're echoing to the customers is I think it helps to bring clarity to the business, so the customers are hearing that consistent messaging, and not to steal everyone's thunder here, but just to echo on some of the pieces that were already addressed. We're in agreement at Foster that having both a broadband and a dedicated product, there's a good place for both of those in every business nowadays. Back in the day, having one source of internet, we weren't as reliant on that. And nowadays, with more and more products moving into cloud infrastructure, in that cloud either being shared or private or your own colo or potentially just a second site. Cloud can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people, but the dependency of quality bandwidth and connecting to those internet-based applications is mission critical. And working with the folks on the call here today, Jim and I have worked on applications together, down in that southern market with Frontier, and understand the importance of making sure customers have, redundant connections so that we minimize any type of disruption, with their business, because technology, like everything, will break, and it's, what is that reasonable time of being down that a customer can withstand before it starts impacting their business. And looking at their mean time to repair or recovery point objective and recovery point. Gosh, I forget, Nathan, what the other term is. It's just skipping me at the moment. But the time that the customer can withstand. Yep. Thank you. And then how much data can be lost before, how much data can they afford to lose, and how fast they need to be back up. And of course, as we bring those two times together, the higher that cost is. And so really helping customers understand, what those those time intervals and what those costs look like. It really helps us work, closely with companies like Mytech to make sure that we're, bringing carrier products that can meet those needs. And at Foster, we help customers leverage market information and pricing strategies to make sure that they understand that they're getting a competitive product, and letting them, be comfortable and guide us in what they feel comfortable with the relationships of the various carriers that both Mytech and Foster have, and then also, what the customer feels comfortable with as well.
Thanks, John. Well, that'll give a good setup to the next the panel discussion. So we have kind of a little word cloud here for those online. We didn't want to have an exact guide as far as how we're going to go through this discussion, so we didn't create slides that were going to guide us down the conversation. But we did want to put up a bunch of the words that you and the audience might have heard or do hear, and we wanted to spend some time just, again, asking questions and talking about it. So at this time, I'd also like to remind the audience, please, if you have any questions specific to internet connectivity, challenges you faced or problems you've had, by all means, throw those questions up there, and I'll be able to work them offline or be able to answer them, try and interject them into the panel conversation. But to start, I want to throw this question out specifically to John or Jim first, and is really that, a lot of the folks on the line, and even, myself, for instance, I was very familiar over the years with T1 lines and DSL connections and things like that. But what I haven't necessarily have a lot of experience with is Ethernet over copper, fiber optic connections. I mean, I understand fiber, but like, where is fiber prevalent in the market that we're talking about right now, and or even wireless connections? What have you seen there as far as new connectivity types that really have only been around because of just building out the infrastructure in the last few years? So I know, John, Jim, do you want to pick that up and kind of elaborate?
Sure. This is John Foster. One of the things that, being in the business now for 15 years, and, certainly the Minnesota footprint, we know and have a good understanding of which buildings are on-net fiber fed existing, and where carriers have what we'll call on-net initiatives. And I'm sure Jim can echo this as well. There's certain targeted areas that, the carriers are looking to bring fiber into those buildings. But want to have a service contract order in hand to know that they're just not plowing fiber assets into buildings without customers actually utilizing the services. So, working carefully with, the telecom leadership teams and understanding what their on-net and near-net initiatives look like, are able to help us position and help those customers leverage the most cost-effective bandwidth, and being able to hit their delivery points as well. Oftentimes, if a building is not on net already with a given service provider, that time delay of minimum of 90 days, if not 6 months, to be able to bring that service in one of the issues that we have here in the Minnesota market is permitting for winter construction. And most cities will not allow digs to be conducted during winter months, and so all construction goes on hold until April 1st, until the frost is out of the ground. So that can definitely impact a business depending if they're looking to move to a different building, or maybe they already have fiber-like assets today, and bandwidth restrictions may apply, and until that can be done, it's critical that we work closely with clients to really understand what their what their lease options are at their new facility, to make sure that we're looking at buildings that will be able to meet the time frame of the move, and be able to have those facilities tested and on net by the delivery move date. So a lot of moving parts now is bandwidth, because all buildings aren't fiber fed yet, and the number of carriers in each building. It really becomes a critical point to engage organizations like us to help them navigate, put that roadmap in play. We're talking with clients oftentimes a year out before their move in the downtown market, for example, to really help them understand what that footprint's going to look like, to make sure that their move and their phones and their internet are going to be ready on the day of their move.
Sounds good. So thanks for that. How about, let me throw something that I think this is going to be a Chris question. And again, I'm someone who's not as technical as some of the other folks on the phone. So Ethernet over copper, Chris. So T1 lines, DSL lines, they run over copper. So
Correct.
this Ethernet over copper thing, what's the difference? What makes it better or worse? When do you recommend it? Where does that come into play relative to what people are used to as traditional connectivity types?
Well, we basically see it coming into play, every day. It is the next step up, alternative from, T1 lines when you want to increase bandwidth. The advantage of Ethernet over copper is really, the availability of copper. It's already typically there in most cases. And the technology being used has been, in service. I deployed it as a customer in the early 2000s, so it's definitely a proven product. So stability, bandwidth options, being able to scale. Typically, you won't see things going more than maybe 20 to 30 meg for speeds, but for most companies, being able to make that jump from, dual T1s at 3 meg to, 10 or 15 is usually, a really good way to get them connected. On the Ethernet side of things, it's a very stable and simple architecture. I mean, it's in every home today. I mean, everyone who has a broadband modem or something in their home has a wireless network, has PCs cabled. That's Ethernet. It's all around us. It works. It's simple. It's very easy to deploy by comparison to T1. There's less components and configurations required. A lot of it is very simplified. So it's an easy deployable solution. The copper is nearly everywhere. So until you get into those bandwidth speeds of where you really have to go, over that 30 megabit mark, that's where fiber will come in. Or if you have something that is very sensitive to latency or jitter, we provide, very good latency metrics for Ethernet over copper. So running, a voice over IP solution with a multi-point Ethernet solution over copper works very well. There's no issues there. However, if you're into data replication or something else where you're doing something from a data center perspective, from an application or a database application, you might have a little tighter controls for latency and packet loss that might require, some of the more strict guidelines of what fiber can offer. Or if you're at a distance, situation, if you're farther away from where a carrier can provide these facilities, fiber is going to be your only option because the copper is sensitive to distance. So what dictates that speed is, first of all, how much copper is available, how many pairs of actual wires are there, what is the gauge of the wire, and then also how far away are you from that handoff point. The farther you are away, the longer the signal can degrade, or the easier the signals can degrade, and therefore lowering the bandwidth option to you. From a carrier perspective, we're able to tell you those things in advance. So as we are working with customers, we will find out what the options are for you what speeds you can obtain, and then we're able to provide those kind of guarantees around that type of dedicated product. So it's really helped customers evolve from the traditional older, T1-based technology or the asymmetrical technology of DSL and cable, and been able to bring into a symmetrical bandwidth, 10 meg upload, 10 meg download, whatever it may be, but it's symmetrical for these type of applications, and basically bring it to you in a much easier time frame with copper that's available.
And that's a great explanation. So now just a couple other things on that. So you mentioned that it's symmetrical, it's distance sensitive, similar to DSL as far as depending on the length, the distance from the facilities. From a price point perspective, and I'm not looking for a quote, but I'm assuming it's a little more than what a DSL line would be, but probably less than if you bonded a bunch of T1s together. I mean, is that
correct? Yeah, you'll find that an Ethernet solution typically is much more affordable than doing multiple T1s. I mean, for some reason, T1s still today carry a significant price point depending on what kind of service you're looking to get, whether it's internet or private line. Bonding those together, the equipment you need to bond those together, all of that can really add up to a lot more than what you'd pay, on a monthly for an Ethernet connection. Now, compared to a DSL or cable, which may run, below the $100 a month mark, you're going to be looking at, depending on bandwidth, of going probably more in the 200 to 300 and up, depending on, the size of the pipe. But it is, it's a competitive market. There's a lot of opportunity out there, and we certainly work with customers in all areas to try to make that work. It's a great technology, and it really lets customers, kind of jump light years ahead from a bandwidth perspective.
Yeah, just to add to that, this is Jim with Frontier. I would say here in the metro area, probably 85% of our metro Ethernet customers, where we're delivering anywhere from 5 meg to 30 or 40 meg in some cases. Probably 85% of the customers in total of internet at high bandwidth speeds are delivered over copper today. It's those rare exceptions where someone absolutely has to have fiber, either because they want, say, for example, a 100 meg connection or a gigabit connection where they need fiber to support that kind of bandwidth. Or another thing that we do for a lot of new facilities, brand new buildings, we'll deliver copper pairs into the building and also a 12 or a 24 strand fiber at the same time that the building's being constructed, so that fiber's in place. So if one of the owners or the tenants in that facility has those kind of requirements, we can deliver the service without the build costs. But generally, the copper, like Chris said, works really, really well. I've got customers that have been installed since 2007, and in some cases, they've never reported an outage. So that's how reliable it is.
That's good. Thank you. Because I know that there's, part of what precipitated us wanting to do this this discussion is that, we as a team end up having a lot of these kind of conversations with customers because of some of the just changes in the technologies. And so we wanted to have the opportunity to get, some experts on the phone. So thank you again for, participating and sharing that. So let me touch, I'm going to ask a question, and I think this one question is going to be a significant trend relative to the way people are using the internet, and it's either hosted phone solutions, voice over IP solutions, right? All of these, and it's going to. The reason why I want to bring this up and ask this question, that we might not have any time for any other questions other than this one after the team has a chance to explain, but is because it touches on latency, it touches on bandwidth, it touches on quality of service, it touches on service level agreement, it touches on an MPLS versus point-to-point, it touches on a lot of these things that really are the complications around telecommunications and internet connectivity. So I guess I don't know who I'm throwing this out to, but can someone talk about voice over IP, SIP trunking, and how that relates to the type of connectivity to get the reliability that people really want relative to a voice connection? Chris, maybe just start there from a technical perspective, or John, I don't know.
Yeah,
yeah.
This is Chris. I can certainly address that. We deal with a lot of questions around SIP and voice over IP. Frontier provides a hosted voice over IP solution as well. So we deal with this, and it really depends on, what the end goal is for the customer's network. Are they trying to connect multiple sites and avoid toll, or at least create more integration, or are they just looking for, connectivity to the cloud, or connectivity via SIP, trunking to replace their existing analog lines or T1 service? There's a lot of it is around bundling of products and trying to obviously save some money here and there to be able to get as much as you can, plus simplification and consolidation. So from a voice perspective, a hosted voice platform typically would require a connection to the internet or a dedicated connection to the data center that's hosting it. That could be an MPLS connection. It could be a point-to-point. It could be an internet pipe. However, with each of those comes different rules that you would need to follow with regard to getting the quality for providing a voice over IP solution. So, in a hosted application, where your call controller is in the cloud somewhere from a provider, and you put phones on your desktops, you're going to want a good connection, like an Ethernet type of connection, so that you have bidirectional bandwidth to be able to provide enough pipe for those phones to stay active, provide enough connectivity for those calls, but also to be able to give you some leeway for the web traffic and email traffic and other application traffic that you have. The quality of service issue, that's where that becomes tricky with some of the hosted solutions. However, there's some technology in place to help mitigate that as well. In a scenario where you have, let's say, 5 locations and they might be across the country, and you want to be able to network those for data, or you already have them networked, but you want to apply voice over IP so that you can 4-digit dial between sites, centralized voicemail, maybe centralized trunking, you're going to want a product that can provide quality of service and create those network drops in each of those offices, but maintain the data and the voice separation, as well as putting the voice in a priority above everything else, so that your calls between sites sound proper. That's where an MPLS type of service comes in, or a service that would be an Ethernet-based network. We provide those type of designs on an Ethernet platform, so multi-point Ethernet. We provide QoS on that. The customer's equipment can provide quality service. We really have a lot of flexibility with that, but all of those pieces really come down to what is the customer's end goal, where are they trying to get with their voice platform, what are their drivers there. The SIP technology question, it's really become a buzzword in the last couple of years, and we deal with it pretty regularly. We provide SIP trunking abilities in the South Metro, and what we've seen is a lot of customers don't understand exactly the difference between what SIP is versus a PRI or a T1 or versus analog trunks or lines. And really the differentiator really comes down to the delivery and sometimes the cost. SIP is definitely more complex to deploy compared to a PRI. If I just can dive into just real quick what those look like. PRI is a standard. It's been around for a long time. It's 23 channels plus a signaling channel. So you get 23 call paths to the outside world. That is a standard interface provided on almost every phone system today. So it's literally plug in the circuit, do some programming on the voice switch, and you're good to go. On the SIP side of things, you're typically delivering those SIP phone lines or SIP trunks over an internet connection, like an Ethernet connection. So they're brought in on the same pipe that your internet connection is done. There is possibly some separation there, but at some point your firewall needs to separate some of that traffic. There's also typically a session border controller, which is either another piece of hardware or virtual hardware, and that's being able to do the call setup for the trunking to the voice platform. So just the difference in the two, one becomes more complex than the other, and typically with SIP you have to involve your data vendor, you have to look at your firewall, you have to look at your switch fabric and all of those pieces, as well as your voice platform, and see how that factors in from a cost perspective versus a PRI or a standard T1 to provide voice. So, they're both great technologies. SIP I see playing more of a factor in large-scale environments where someone may need 50 lines or more of service, because then you can deploy, say, 100 lines over a single pipe coming in, and then you configure it. You might have a high availability setup with voice for a call center application. But for most customers that are running, that need 12 to 23 lines or even up to 40 plus lines, you can typically do a lot more with a PRI and have a lot less technical, possibility for issues or configuration issues. So that's kind of the, it's a big bucket of items, but there's a lot of things in play there on those networking types and connectivity types.
Thank you, Chris. I know I was asking a big mouthful of a question.
A lot of stuff.
And I think that the general gist is that, and for those of you listening in, that I mean, this stuff, it never ceases to amaze me how what can appear really simple gets incredibly complex very quickly, with all the different variables that have to be accounted for as far as the type of equipment you have, your firewall, your switching, your phones, your phone system, your internet connections, the different types of internet connections, all these things and more play into what's the right fit for you, and where I know from my experience of working with both John and Frontier, Jim and Chris, that they do a great job of trying to match those requirements. At this point,
I think if I could add something too, I think Frontier as a company, we actually operate in, a lot of people don't know this, we actually operate in 28 states around the country, and we're the 5th largest telecom provider across the country. So we've got a lot of history since 1935 in this business, but I think that the one thing we see out there too is there's always a lot of buzzwords, as everybody knows. Lately it's been the cloud, and I think we're probably, as a company, and Chris, I think you'd agree with this, we're probably not bleeding edge, but we're probably a fast follower. So we're not always real hip on people signing up for the first thing that's come out on the block. We probably wait and see if it's proven technology before we dive into it.
Yeah, I think that would apply to all of us. I mean, we, like Microsoft patches, we don't always deploy those when they first come out either. We want to wait till everybody else experiences some pain before we roll those out, right? So I definitely agree. I know that, and I've had recent conversations with John where we've talked about the exact same thing as well. So to be respectful, we're actually a few minutes over. We usually try and end this right promptly at noon. But there's a lot to talk about here, and I'd like to just summarize it by saying, look, I know I can speak for the folks on the phone, and there's other people that Mytech works with from with different areas that have some great expertise. But I know that the folks on the phone, John and Jim in particular, and Chris as well, but Frontier and Foster, I mean, they do a great job of making sure they're aligning those priorities. And the other thing that I would encourage everyone is that talk to your IT service provider. If it's not Mytech, talk to your internal IT person, because a lot of the stuff that they're talking about isn't just about the connectivity that they can provide. It has to integrate with your equipment, whether that's your switches, your phones, your firewalls, multiple sites, etc. So just engage your advisors to help find the right fit, so you're not buying something that's actually not going to do what you need it to do. I know John and Jim and I have all experienced that over the years, where you buy something because you want to do voice over IP, and you know what you bought wasn't going to deliver the quality of service that you needed, and so you spent a bunch of money that you didn't need to spend, or that you should have spent it in a different way.
Yeah, so I would summarize that all by saying that of all the 3-letter acronyms that exist out there in the telco internet world, the only one that does not really apply is DIY. So
do it yourself.
For folks to reach out to the experts who can help you.
Thank you. So, Phil, if you advance the slide a little bit, I just want to go to the last slide. I just want to say thank you, everyone, for joining us online. I want to thank Jim and Chris from Frontier for joining us and providing your expertise, as well as John from Foster joining us and adding value, and as well as, there are folks that we would definitely recommend to work with if it makes sense for you. So thanks a lot, everybody. Signing off. And definitely have a great the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.